As the offseason is in full swing in baseball mode, even though there's literally nothing going on, we're here because there is a lot to discuss towards the Toronto Blue Jays and a little bit around baseball, but more in particular about the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm excited to talk to these fellas again. It's been a while. Cole Whiston, Robin Tillemont. Can't wait to get this going. Let's go.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Blue Jays Center.
Bautista drives it deep left field. Gone!
The sickest Toronto Blue Jays podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Well, first off, welcome everybody to the first real off-season pod for Blue Jays Center. Welcome in, Robin Tillemont, Cole Whiston. I'm James Price. Welcome, fellas. It's been a while. How we doing?
Man, it's been a minute there. I think all of us have collectively needed a cleansing from Blue Jays baseball after that season. But I think it's good to get the wheels rolling again. I think it's been over, a month, 6 weeks since the last time we talked. So we're really excited to be talking Blue Jays baseball once again with you folks as we start, like you mentioned, James, the first official episode of the offseason.
Yep, we let the playoffs go on. The Dodgers win the World Series. Teo have his moment. And then, we took some weeks to digest the rest of the offseason. And here we are. Finally, some moves have been made. So we got some news to talk about.
Oh, yeah, but you mentioned, Cole, the Dodgers. Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit. Yeah, congrats to the Dodgers, blah, blah, blah. But more in particular, congrats to Teoscar Hernandez. As much as, I'm more of usually the guy that I don't like former players winning just because I'm bitter like that. But Teoscar Hernandez is a Blue Jay that you can always root for. Obviously, if he won in Seattle, it might have been even a little bit worse. But since it's farther removed, it's not as bad. But congrats to Teo. And, of course, can't forget Kevin Kiermaier getting his World Series ring and then saying peace out after that. So pretty cool stuff for them. Anything you guys want to say about him?
Thank God it wasn't the Yankees. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
I mean, the LA Dodgers, it's good that they beat the Yankees. I'm obviously not going to fawn over the Dodgers team that, have ran the highest payroll in all of baseball once again. And obviously we all know the Ohtani nonsense, but I'm happy for Teo. Teo, one of my all-time favorite Blue Jays, happy to get a ring. Kevin Kiermaier, it was a short stay, but it was a sweet stay, specifically that one season in 2023. Glad that he can end his career with a World Series ring as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it on my end.
Oh, yeah.
I'm definitely not one of those people that's bittersweet for the Dodgers. I think the biggest market winning with the GOAT is good. So congrats to Ohtani. Congrats to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And Kevin Kiermaier, the best part about him winning a World Series is the fact that he didn't do it with the Rays because fuck the Rays. So that's another good part of all of this too, on top of the Hernandez stuff. So, congrats to them. I called it.
That's enough congratulating to other teams winning. And now, fellas, let's get into the meat and potatoes, the thing that everyone loves talking about this offseason. Except for Blue Jay fans, I think we can all agree we are guarded. There is a wall between me and believing, and I am not going through it until I see, Ross Atkins shaking a hand of a certain player at a press conference and him talking about how he's loved to be a Blue Jay. And of course, if you don't know who I'm talking about, you're nuts. It's Juan Soto. There's a lot going on, boys. Obviously, the biggest things we've heard are the 5 teams that have offered him a contract. Obviously, Boston, the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, and of course, the Toronto Blue Jays for what it's worth. So we're here. We're here again. Whether you believe it or not, we're here. And we'll touch on, screw it. Then he posts a stupid commercial, right? He's got to do that, right? Go on his Instagram, post a commercial with Celsius, the drink, and all the Jays fans are losing their shit. And it's like, oh, wait, Celsius. We only use Celsius up here. They use Fahrenheit down there. That's a sign. And it's just playing games. But I kind of like it, though. I don't know. Shohei was all quiet and stuff. I kind of like Juan Soto playing up the game. How you guys feeling about it all?
I certainly think Juan Soto is going to make a decision much smoother than the Ohtani stuff. Ooh. I mean, despite them going to end up at a similar contract, which a year ago I think we wouldn't have predicted Soto to end up at that contract, they aren't the same player. They aren't the same level of player. They aren't the same impact of a player. Ohtani has probably already made the Dodgers his entire contract, and Soto is an actual investment into the player and the talent that he is on the field, not just the brand that comes with him. So I think this will be an entirely different situation. But yes, Juan Soto starting all of this mind games off with a Celsius commercial, I think was just well timed by him and his team.
Oh, it was. Yeah.
I think you mentioned a very important thing there, Cole, and that's the business side of it. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani, the justification for Rogers, basically giving him almost $1 billion Canadian dollars last year. With that, well, I mean, their offer was never reported, but the fact that they were somewhat close suggests that they were right around the ballpark of what he actually got, which was a asterisk 700 million USD contract. Which obviously with the deferrals, we don't have to get all into that. Juan Soto is not going to be that similar type of player. He might be, you could argue he's as good of a hitter as Shohei Ohtani in terms of product on the field, but in terms of bringing in money from a business perspective, he doesn't have a whole country backing him up the way Shohei Ohtani did. Japan obviously a rabid fan base for baseball specifically, and we saw how they got behind their superstar in the postseason. So I do think that's important to recognize. Another thing that's important to recognize is that Juan Soto's kind of made it clear he's going to go to the highest bidder. He's going to go to the highest bidder, and he's offering the Yankees no hometown discount, despite the fact that in his 1 year there, he was excellent. They won they made the World Series. Pardon me exactly. I got to bite my tongue on that one. Thank God again. So I think that's very important to recognize. And you mentioned the teams that are in the race. One of those teams, the New York Mets, who are owned by, as we all know, Steve Cohen, the most aggressive, basically the owner that's willing to spend all the money he can to bring in Juan Soto, not only to make his team better, but to stick it to the crosstown rivals, the Yankees. To me, I still think he goes to the Yankees, to the Mets. Sorry. I think despite the fact that we're here again, we're doing this again with a little bit of false hope. Let's be honest, boys. I mean, as much as we can tell ourselves we're excited, any Juan Soto news, we're on top of it. We're hopeful. But I think from a realistic point of view, it's likely not going to happen. And this time around, we can talk about what they're going to do after. They have to be able to find a successful pivot after the Juan Soto news drops that he's not going to sign with the Jays, much like what was last year with Shohei Ohtani, when that was heavily criticized that their pivot was too slow when they put all the eggs in one basket. We'll talk about that shortly. But in terms of Juan Soto to the Jays, it's nice to hope. It's nice to pump a lot of hope, but ultimately, I think it's going to be all for naught.
Yeah, I think Juan Soto, in my opinion, just from watching the playoffs, he's the best hitter in baseball. Watching a guy go up there. Look, I get it, and it can be a debate between anybody. That's totally fine. But watching not only his at bats be great, and sometimes the eye sometimes he takes a lot of borderline pitch, which is fine. But I can't remember which pitcher it was. And again, they kind of had let's be honest, a pretty easy road to the World Series. But I can't remember the pitcher it was in the Guardians. Watching Juan Soto play absolute mind games with that guy and then take him deep to dead center for a grand slam. Was it in extra innings?
Was it Gaddis?
Yeah, it might have been actually. And watching him do his Soto shuffle on like a 2-2 pitch, just like a hair outside and like staring at him, smiling, shaking, nodding his head. Then he takes him deep. And I'm like, my God, not only are you an incredible player, you are that confident. And not only is he that confident on the field, the fact that with the Nationals, he rejected $440 million. You reject the $440 million contract. First off, that's nuts. I understand betting on yourself, but that is crazy. And it's working for him.
He rejected another one that was even more money than that with the Yankees. Yeah.
Right. And how old was he when the whole Nationals thing happened? What, 23?
So that was 3 years ago, right? 2 years ago?
He's 26 now. So 23 years old. And you have a chance to get 440 million ones right in your pocket. And you're like, nah, I'm going to wait 3 years.
Imagine being so good at your job that someone offers you 440 million. Like, yeah, come on, make me a real offer.
It's a joke. It's insane.
Yeah, I'll make more than that.
And I think we can all agree that Steve Cohen is the guy that'd be like, oh, you want to offer him 800? Here's 810. Oh, you want to go higher than that? Here you go. That's just what's going to end up happening. I think we can all agree on that. I think the Yankees will lose out on him, which I think we can all agree would be, just a cherry on top, fellas. Eh?
Yeah, no, it would be the awesome consolation prize. Unlike last year with Ohtani, where it's like, oh, the Jays don't get him and that's it. Now, at the very least, if Juan Soto were to sign with the Mets, obviously we'd be instantly in that moment disappointed that Soto didn't sign with the Jays, but at the same time, the Yankees lose their biggest star. And yes, you mentioned there, James. I think you're a little conservative. He is the best hitter in baseball. I think we saw what him and Aaron Judge looked like in the clutch. Shohei Ohtani obviously had really good numbers. He's not going to be as good of a hitter next year now that he's going to be pitching again. I think it's a pretty safe bet that Juan Soto is going to be the best hitter in baseball by OPS plus next year. I would bet on it. personally.
Wouldn't surprise me. Would not surprise me. Cole,
He wasn't this year.
I think Ohtani was this year, but Ohtani's
No,
gonna
Judge
stay
was.
bet. He's not
Judge was, and it was
sure.
No, but Judge was,
Sure.
but Judge was by a large portion. It wasn't close between Judge and the next closest player.
When I look at judging off of that, though, I don't like to just look off the regular season numbers as it comes for like MVPs and all like these awards and everything. Fine, I'm totally fine with looking off of all that stuff.
Fair.
But when I look at best hitter in baseball, I can't just look at regular season stuff.
Yeah,
I have to look at postseason numbers. And watching Juan Soto not only, have an incredible regular season, he got better. And he's been incredible in every postseason.
Yeah, and it's not that I necessarily vehemently disagree with Juan Soto being in the conversation or someone being definitive on that take, because Juan Soto hasn't just done it once, he's done it twice. And they were in significantly different portions of his career. So the fact that he was able to do it at such a young age and then years later gets back to that moment and can do it again proves to you that, it's probably something in him as a player. And, we can have the debates about what that intangible is, but and Judge, by all means, has proven time and time again that he is not that guy. I don't think Shohei Ohtani has done enough or had enough of a sample for us to make a decision on whether he is a good postseason player or not, especially in the fact that in the biggest moments he was dealing with a full-on shoulder surgery that he played through, and the fact that he also offers 50 stolen bags on top of it has to matter. So I think that
won't happen next year, though. He's not going to steal 50 bags.
No, he's not going to. But in terms of the quality of a hitter, I think that the guy who can go 40 for 40 next year might still be just as valuable and just as good as Juan Soto. So that's why I think that the debate is still to be had until we've seen a larger sample of Ohtani in the postseason. But not relevant to the offseason or this conversation. Juan Soto is in the conversation, and he is top 5 and not 4 or 5. We can all agree on that. Correct. So that's what matters. Yeah.
And worst 3. He's at worst 3.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to talk about Juan Soto wise? Because there's a lot of other things we can talk about.
If anybody watched this show, which a large portion of you who have watched this podcast did watch this episode, which was me going on a rant months ago, like mid-season, right around July, about the Jays getting Juan Soto. I also did it on Blue Jays Center Instagram page. So first and foremost, any other page that claims that they talked about it first, they're wrong. You can date check all of it that you want. Second, while my main point there was the Jays just can't get outbid, I was not prepared for another team to make that exact statement. I was not prepared for Steve Cohen to make that exact statement, and he said he would exceed the next closest offer by $50 million. So I didn't know that there was going to be another player like that, and the fact that there is obviously has changed my opinion a little bit. Do I think Soto should go for $700+ million? No. So if that's what it takes, I do actually agree with not going after him for the Toronto Blue Jays. I will say that. So that's where
here's what's next then, folks, because obviously the Juan Soto thing, we mentioned it. Let's play the likely scenario. Juan Soto signs with the Mets or the Yankees or whatever have you. Probably not the Dodgers now after they signed Blake Snell. But at this moment, I want you guys to talk about how soon should the Jays pivot? I mean, obviously right away, but ultimately, what do they pivot to exactly? I think that's what we're going to talk about next in our offseason outlook, James.
Yeah, that's why. Are we going to go Jordan Romano next?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So before we do that, before we do that, we'll start with the in-house stuff. And I wouldn't say a shocking thing happens. And look, the fan base is a rabid fan base that hates the damn management team to the core. And I actually, didn't mean to do that to the core. Anyways, they have let Jordan Romano go. Now, Rob, don't, let's not do this. Where he's not technically, or he could still be brought back on a different sort of contract and whatnot. But they non-tendered Jordan Romano, and that says a lot about what his arm is all about.
Yeah.
He obviously didn't pitch much last year for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, but it was shocking. I don't agree with the sentiment that it wasn't shocking. This was shocking. Learning about the fact that he has an elbow that the Jays don't even trust enough to give him a contract, that is shocking.
They don't trust the contract, the $7 million or whatever it was. That would be worth it. I think that's.
Yeah. No, and I understand that, but I'm saying the fact that was shocking. We were not anticipating that happening. By all metrics, we thought Jordan Romano would be tendered.
Yeah.
There was a lot of debate.
It's hard to say for me.
It's shocking that for a team's biggest weakness, and that's been acknowledged by the front office, being the bullpen, that it has to be that bad. That you're not willing to pay Jordan Romano $7 million, which, by the way, isn't even the most in our bullpen. Chad Green on the books next year is $10.5 million. So the fact that you weren't willing to pay Jordan Romano the second most in your bullpen, and you're going to have to fork out that around that amount of money on one guy to replace Jordan Romano next year, that's at minimum is going to be $7 million. The fact that it can't be Jordan Romano, that to me was shocking. But I guess you guys were not as shocked as I was, but I do want to say I think there was a lot of fans who were shocked by this news.
Yeah, I mean, shocked and angry and upset is, I think, it's very different, right? Shocked is in like, whoa, that actually happened. I think that's probably where I was.
Right.
And thinking about it more, I'm like, there's got to be something to this, right? The organization knows we all hate their guts with a passion. They all know that. So you're just going to non-tender the kid from Markham, Ontario, who has this big, light show at Rogers Center, who's your closer. And let's be honest, one of the only guys you semi-trust coming out of that bullpen. There had to be something to it. So there's nothing. Yeah, that's why I kind of got away from the whole surprise part.
Yeah. To Rob's defense, Rob, I'm going to throw it to you here. To your defense, because I'm sure you might take this from where I'm going. Him not technically being gone is actually a reality if the elbow is as bad as what the Jays anticipate it being. Let's say he goes into the market, and through all these conversations and medicals, they come to the same conclusion that there's not a lot of teams that are willing to trust him. The one team that would be willing to give him another shot and just give him a prove-it contract kind of thing it would make the most sense for it to be the Jays. So it wouldn't be – I don't think it would be – I mean, this is me maybe being hopeful. But if the album was as bad as the Jays anticipated, I don't think it's an unreasonable expectation to have Jordan Romano come back.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to talk about Jordan Romano specifically, like his Jays legacy in a bit. But before we do the administrative stuff, I do think it's important to recognize that the $7 million, that's not nothing money for a reliever. Like $7 million, if you're paying a reliever $7 million, you got to expect him to pitch. You guys have to be pitching pretty damn good, And obviously we can mention, how bad actually the elbow is. We don't know. We don't know the medicals, but if people who have more expert opinion than we do, they made a decision within the organization that said that this guy is just not going to be able to pitch this season, at least not for that price tag. And I think at that point, it's a no-brainer. We saw last season, we have proof of concept, what an injured Jordan Romano looked like. He was injured the entire year, and the short portion of the year that he did pitch, it was ineffective. I mean, you just can't afford, as an organization, to pay that $7 million if you're not going to be sure that you're going to get a top-of-the-line reliever. And based on the medicals, what we can assume, not know, because we don't have all the information, is that they weren't confident in that. And I think if that's your assessment, I think that you have to sometimes make the cutthroat decision. I know it sucks that James mentioned Jordan Romano, kid who grew up just 30 minutes north of downtown Toronto. He would go to Blue Jays games as a kid. Markham, obviously, in the GTA, proof of concept, was an excellent reliever for this team. He's third all time in saves in Blue Jays history. I mean, obviously, you have the Hanky Ward, the two best relievers in Blue Jays history on those championship teams. But in the last 30 years, you could make an argument Jordan Romano was the best Blue Jays reliever of the last 3 decades, which sucks that he's got to go. But unfortunately, sometimes you got to make that call. And we mentioned the Blue Jays bullpen has really struggled, and you just can't afford to give $7 million to a guy who you're not confident is going to pitch for you at that level. Because that's $7 million that you can allocate. You can now allocate to other relievers, and God knows that this team needs a ton of reliever help this winter, because I'm going to talk about it shortly. But we all know they're not a good job. They've not done a good job of building homegrown bullpens on the cheap. They have had to actually go out there and fix it externally, which, if you're going to do that again this year, you're going to need all the resources you can get.
Yeah, and that's one thing I will say. For all the critiques we have for this front office and the fact that we definitely don't think they should still be there, they're not that dumb. No. If Romano had any chance of being worth $7 million next year, the Jays would have taken that shot, because it makes way too much sense to keep him if you think that he could be that this year. So in this year especially, that bullpen, we're going to get into it, but I do want to just preface it. Like right now on the books, you have Eric Swanson, Chad Green, Brandon Little, and Zach Pop. That is a bullpen that you cannot run out in 2025. And if Eric Swanson and Chad Green are your top two leverage guys, you're winning 70 games. That is just how it's going to happen. So by all means, the front office does not deserve critique on this move. Period.
No. And you mentioned Eric Swanson. He was one of the, so obviously Romano didn't get tendered on the $7 million contract. Eric Swanson does get tendered on a 1 year, $3 million contract. And Genesis Cabrera sent packing. So there's that. There's another bullpen arm. Really your only lefty that you trust.
Yeah.
Ish. Gone.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, we didn't trust anybody in that damn bullpen by the season.
Yeah.
But
even Chad Green in September, the wheels kind of fell off a bit for him too.
It was ugly. Now, there are guys that we're going to be looking at when it comes to the bullpen, comes to help, because we need a lot of it.
We need everything.
The offseason outlook, because there's lots of things to discuss. We'll talk some Anthony Santander, and that we'll get into it right now. And you know what? Let's start with him. Let's start with the bat, Anthony Santander. The Jays have been linked to this guy for who knows how long. And obviously, Nightingale tweets out that the Blue Jays badly covet, in air quotes, Anthony Santander from former Baltimore Oriole. I don't know, fellas. Going from Juan Soto.
I'm with you.
It's just,
I'm with you, by the way.
Yeah, I can't, because the price tag will be high, and it's just years and length, and I don't know. Cole, how you feeling? But take this thing. I don't know where I'm at.
Yeah. So give me your second best outfielder option then after Juan Soto.
Mine personally?
Yeah.
Tyler O'Neill is actually one guy that I'm really interested in.
And in the Tyler O'Neill news, the reports are that he is also drawing a ton of interest in free agency. So that price tag is also going to be probably above what he's actually worth. So if we're talking about we're upset between Juan Soto and Anthony Santander, yeah, obviously. But Anthony Santander to Tyler O'Neill to Michael Conforto to the options aren't great for outfielder bats. So Anthony Santander, I think we gotta if he's willing to come here and it's somebody that we've been linked with and have a good relationship with and have a good chance of signing, and we don't have to overpay him as much as what maybe we would have had to for O'Neill, then I say do it, mainly because you don't have another choice. Your options in the outfield right now on your roster are Dalton Varsho and George Springer, and then a bunch of guys that would fill into left field like the Davis Schneiders of the world. So I think you have to take your shot at one of those two options. I'm fine with you disagreeing on which one that is. I'm just saying that I don't think there's a whole lot to get upset with when it comes to Anthony Santander.
Yeah. No, and I do think you're right. I don't think that this offseason free agency is like last season, where like last season it was just a whole lot of like really mid, if we're being honest. I mean, just to use a colloquial term there. But like last year, the justification was, you know what, there's nothing else out there, so let's just go ahead and give Cody Bellinger 9 figures. And to me, I really hated that strategy. I really wasn't for it. I didn't think that was a good way to operate. And a lot of people will talk bad about that offseason. I will say, from the Blue Jays' point of view, the offseason was disappointing in terms of revealing how little the Blue Jays actually had to trade. But in terms of free agency, I think they did a good job of staying away from Cody Bellinger. Matt Chapman was really the only guy who I thought really would have made a difference on this team. I don't view the same. I think Anthony Santander
and Teoscar.
Yeah, we'll talk about Teoscar too. That's another guy that I have on my wish list right now. I think there are three guys who I think you could instantly fix a lot of the Jays' problems. I mean, obviously, Santander, Tyler O'Neill, and Teoscar is a third guy. Obviously, as I alluded to earlier, none of those guys are perfect players. They're all kind of the same archetype of players. They're corner outfielders who have a lot of power, a lot of swing and miss, and not a whole lot of glove. I do think that all of them, though, can instantly come in and be a legitimate cleanup hitter for you next year, right behind Vlad. And I think that would be a really nice duo. I think all of them would instantly just be a 30 home run hitter, put your head on the pillow. Yeah, I'm confident that guy is my cleanup hitter going into next season.
Yeah.
If I were to decide between the three, the reason why I would tip the scales to Tyler O'Neill, two reasons. One being the defensive versatility. Now, I mentioned none of these guys are good defenders. They're all minus gloves. But at least Tyler O'Neill, unlike Santander, his primary position is left field, which would naturally be a good fit on the roster because you already have Varsho in center, you already have George Springer in right, so that would be a natural fit. And also between O'Neill and Teoscar, the 3-year age difference matters for me. The fact that Tyler O'Neill's 3 years younger, so that's how I got to that conclusion. But ultimately, I think all those guys are kind of similar-ish players. And I do think it's finally time for the Blue Jays to utilize the Dalton Varsho asset because for the last 2 years, we acquired Dalton Varsho with the espoused value that he's going to be this great center fielder who's going to make all these great plays, and yet you stick him in left field for Kevin Kiermaier. It's about time that you can kind of punt on defense in the corner outfield because you can take advantage of having the best center fielder in baseball for rolling center for you.
Yeah.
So that's how I got to that. To me, those are my 3 guys.
Helps when he wins a Gold Glove too.
That's
Dalton on that one, by the way.
Yeah.
And the Jays win another. The Jays do the thing they love best and win a team Gold Glove again.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah. So okay, now I got to touch on all these points. Okay, so James, first and foremost, at least the Jays accomplished the one thing that they thought the one thing that they wanted to do. Right? The Jays said they were going to go all defense, and then they won two AL team Gold Glove awards. So you know what? What you wanted to do, it worked. You got it. To Rob's point on Dalton Varsho, the reason why they wanted a center fielder just as good as him in center field, but better, and not Dalton Varsho, is because Dalton Varsho's arm is league average. But I still agree with him being in center field over anybody who is going to have an OPS in the 500s. So I agree. And then as for left field, I'll take anybody. The reason why we're not so high on Teoscar is because by all reports, it seems like he's going back to the Dodgers, probably on a team-friendly deal because why wouldn't you if you're Teoscar Hernandez? You've been playing your entire career to be in the moment that you just had, and they're willing to give you, enough money that's not like well below market value, and you're at the end of your career anyway, so you might as well enjoy, Los Angeles and being on the MLB's version of the Dallas Cowboys. So that's why
we're a lot better.
Yeah, exactly. We've kind of narrowed it down to O'Neill and Santander, and I think that it's not rocket science.
Now, the one thing I will say about Anthony Santander, I do like the switch hitting aspect of him.
Right. And I think that matters a lot, too. That's why I favor Santander, because switch hitting in this lineup actually matters, because we can't seem to get a guy who hits from the left side that we can actually rely on. We just can't seem to get it. So if Santander could be at least a small portion of that guy, then that solves some problems, too.
Now, he is coming off the reason why I'm a little skeptical. I just don't like dollar figure. I don't know what the hell it's going to look like, but he's coming off career years, and it's not even close. Right?
Career at 30 is always a red flag. Career at 30
career high 44 homers. His next career high was only 33. Career high in RBIs. Take that for what it is. 814 OPS. The only time he in his entire career that he's ever had over an 800 OPS before last season was in the COVID season of 2020. The year before was 797, so take that for what it is, but there's that, and he also is on the wrong side of 30, so again, take it for what it is. But if we're talking about those certain players, like obviously Teoscar is probably not going to come back. Let me rephrase that. He's not going to come back. And Tyler O'Neill, look, Canadian, sure, you can make that aspect if you want. Got power, but I mean, what else does he really have other than that? For me, I don't see much out there. And obviously Anthony Santander, like we talked about, is like, he's a switch hitter. You put that as your force. It changes a lot of things to the lineup. It lengthens things out. It changes other teams with what they're trying to do to you. And let's be honest, it helps your 1 through 3. It helps Vladdy. It helps Bo moving forward.
Not to mention that 1 to 4 is likely going to have another lefty in the top 3, which is going to be Spencer Horwitz. So if that's the case, then having 2 lefties in your top 4, whenever you need it, facing a righty on the mound, that's going to be huge. So,
and absolutely.
How do you guys handicap the point that Santander has only played left field once in the last 2 years? He's played 1 game in left field the last 2 years. Like, what happens with George then? Like, is he okay to move?
No, I think you just stick Santander in left field, and because you have Dalton Varsho in center field, you'll be fine.
Yeah,
but here's the thing: this him moving to left field, which obviously he's not that comfortable in, because obviously he hasn't played there in the last 2 years. What does that contribute to the price tag?
Rob, I think I might be speaking for minimal Blue Jay fans or a lot. I don't know. I could give a rat's ass as to what he
We can, but what if that's a factor for him? What if he doesn't want to play? And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I'll play left field, but now you got to pay me more.
Right, but we're not having the discussion on whether or not we give a shit about what he prefers.
This matters, but that matters.
No.
You give him the money, doesn't matter. You give him the money, he doesn't care.
You have to pay more than market value is what I'm saying.
No, we're gonna have to anyways. We're in Toronto.
Yeah, we're just asking.
Yeah, exactly. On top of that, you're already paying a tax. You're going to pay a double tax now? I don't know.
Okay. Two things.
That's a valid consideration, though.
Two things. What he prefers doesn't factor into a conversation of what we prefer. So when we're discussing who between the two guys we would prefer, him and his preferences on where he likes to live and what he likes to eat and where he likes to play in the outfield. Right. It's not a factor to what we prefer. Second,
it's not, but it is a strategic, tangible consideration that you have to make.
No, but if you're saying you prefer Tyler O'Neill over Anthony Santander because you think Santander is not going to play left field, then those are two different conversations. They don't have. Yeah. So what I'm saying, and then on top of the double tax, we're already paying tax, and by all means, I don't think the difference between Santander playing right field and left field is going to be anything that is worth talking about.
Because I don't think.
Well, I think the easiest thing to do, easiest thing is just George Springer. You just find a way to move his contract somewhere, and all of a sudden you now have a lot to work with. That'd be the easiest move.
That would be great.
Let's be honest, though. If you're Anthony Santander, why the hell do you care? You're getting your bag.
Yeah.
It's probably your last big bag you're gonna get.
Yeah.
So you're done. This is your payday. If you want to do what the team wants and be like, sure, I can play there, but you'll have to jack it up a little bit for me. And they want to do it, do it.
Yeah, if we're the highest bidder,
that argument is valid if we're bidding against nobody. But if we're bidding against two teams, one of them is going to offer him the same amount of money or like slightly less amount of money for the Toronto tax or whatever, and they're willing to offer him a position of comfortability. I think that matters. That definitely matters. I think that you're gonna have to overpay at that point if it comes to that. And who knows that? Again, I'm all theorizing. The fact that he's only played one game lets me make assumptions. For all I know, maybe the Orioles didn't want him to play left field. Maybe he's totally okay with it. Who knows? But I do think that's a valid consideration.
Yeah.
Who they have left instead?
I'm not sure.
Colton Cowser, maybe?
I mean,
no, was he an infielder?
They had Hayes is their center fielder.
That's right? He went to the Phillies.
Yeah. I don't think
during that time, during the last 2 years.
I don't think it's important.
No, you give him the money because you're going to have to. It's the only reason we got George Springer is because they gave him the extra year, which, boy, is that biting us in the ass right now.
Yeah, and obviously we would prefer to get rid of George Springer. Like that
sure.
The reason why we aren't saying that is because we don't think it's going to happen.
It's not feasible.
It's not feasible. So, yeah.
Yep.
No. All right, boys. Let's get into some frisky trade talk. Huh?
Yeah, but before we get into the trades, I do want to mention one more thing. How do you guys feel? I mean, we talked about the outfield candidates. How do you guys feel about? We sort of talked about this last podcast decades ago, if you guys remember that. The idea of maybe doing a different kind of move, maybe going after a more, let's say, what's the right word I can use here? A better player, just straight up. I'll say a better player, but at a position that you don't need, and that's Ha-Seong Kim, a Willie Adames, then you figure out the Bo Bichette thing on the back end.
Okay, you said Ha-Seong Kim, and I don't know why my first mindset went to what the hell was his name? The old Orioles guy that we played in 2016. What the hell was his name? Big chunky fellow. Yeah, why the hell? I mean, I guess okay, fair enough. That guy, yeah. Anyways, yeah, Ha-Seong Kim. That'd be interesting.
So I mean, yeah, it sounds like he's going to be outside of our price tag. But in terms of Willie Adames, I think that's where the conversation should have transitioned anyways, which is other guys in other positions that we do need, i.e. Another infielder.
Because they're just better players. We talked about Santander or Tyler O'Neill, and don't get me wrong, I think they both help this team a lot, but they're both imperfect players. They're both players that are very flawed in ways, Whereas Willie Adames, that's a guy who instantly you put in there, and he's the best player in that offseason. Like, if you acquire Willie Adames through free agency, it's hard to envision, other than Juan Soto, a better player you can get. Yeah,
no, and I agree with that. So, and Willie Adames is one of the guys that the Jays also are linked to. I definitely would assume in a pivot scenario. So Willie Adames, 1,000%, the Jays should be, in my opinion, not only preparing to pivot. I think if he is agreed to a deal, you do it. Like, you forget the Juan Soto stuff because you can figure that out if Juan Soto all of a sudden comes back and he's like, you know what, like I really liked your offer. If you could just up it by $100 million, then we're down, whatever. I think you can figure that out on the back end. You'll come to terms with Juan Soto if he comes back to you, because I think right now it's kind of just the Jays gave him an offer and that's really it. Like I don't think the Jays are going to circle back to Juan Soto really. I think that they're going to let the market play itself out and see what happens. So I think right now the pivot should already be Willy Adames. And yes, it 1,000% has to do with Bo Bichette, in all likelihood, walking next year. Because that's, I think, another big part of this free agency is that both Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette, as of right now, are not under contract past this year. Hopefully, for Vladdy, that changes. That's the only optimistic outlook for Jays fans this offseason is Vladdy getting signed. But I still think it's 50-50, and that is terrifying to say because I said
50-50 at best.
Yeah, I said multiple times throughout the year that you cannot convince your fans that you're going to compete in 2025 with both of them not under contract. One, because it's a bad business decision.
Horrible.
Two, because that probably means you weren't willing to fork out the money in able to put out a competitive team in that year. So both of those things are very significant. And that's why Willy Adames makes sense from a multitude of reasons. Another guy that I was thinking that just get the better player, Christian Walker. And this is a low key one. It's because Vladdy has not gotten back to the Gold Glove form at first base, and Christian Walker, the year that Vladdy beat him in the Gold Glove race, Christian Walker's since then won 2 Gold Gloves, and I don't know what his price tag is going to be. Plus, you need a guy who can DH. And I think that platooning Vladdy and Christian Walker at first base and DH this year can actually be a good thing. I know Springer is also going to take up some time there, and I guess I could throw a wrinkle in things. But it sounds like the Jays are also planning on using Vladdy at third base more often this year. I don't know why, and I'm hoping that is only because they have not solidified a guy like Willy Adames who can just play third base. But Christian Walker, I think, is a low-key one. I also agree it's not realistic.
I wouldn't love it.
Yeah,
I feel like it's not. I feel like it's not worth basically like taking out so much flexibility positionally for Gold Glove first base. Which like Gold Glove first base, like don't get me wrong, it's obviously important, but like I think like if it's different if it's a third base or shortstop or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that kind of makes sense for the Willy Adames Bo Bichette thing. I'm not sure I'm with the Christian Walker. Vlad Guerrero Jr. thing. I do think that like, and obviously this is not a good comparison, but we saw last year with Daniel Vogelbach how difficult it was to have any sort of positional versatility there. And obviously Christian Walker is far away country miles better than Daniel Vogelbach, no question about it. But I do think that the same linear thinking applies, where like it's just too difficult on an old team that doesn't have a whole lot of positional flexibility to begin with.
Yeah, we'll say this.
I get it. They're a little younger now. You don't longer have Justin Turner and Kevin Kiermaier, which is weighing up the age average. But I still don't think it's like the best way to go about it this offseason.
So this is the whole Christian Walker bit. He's a 3-time Gold Glover. By season start, he'll be 34 years old. But the bat hasn't slowed down. He's hit 26 plus homers the last 3 years, including 36 in 22 and 33 in 2023. He's at an OPS of over 800 the last 3 years. And in, 4 of his 5 full big league seasons, he's had over an 800 OPS. He's been solid. OPS plus in the 120s for the most part. I mean, he's been a good player, but at 34 years old, the clock's ticking.
Yeah, no, I get it. But to me, it was just like, plug and play. He's your DH, and everything else around that can be figured out. Or sorry, Vladdy's your DH, and everything else around that can be figured out. But more importantly, and I think this is where the conversation should be going, and it will, both trade target wise, but also free agency wise, and that's the pitching staff. Mostly the bullpen. Some big arms available in the pen. Tanner Scott at the top of that list. Keegan Madison did talk about him in the guys who could replace Jordan Romano. And I don't think, at first, I looked at him like, the Jays aren't paying $15 million for their closer this year. This is just not going to happen when they're running on a small budget. I still don't think that's going to happen. But would I be shocked? I don't know, because Tanner Scott also is from the left side. And as we've mentioned 100 times over the season, you need a guy from the left side who you can trust. Get the best guy on the fucking roster, or best guy available. He fixes two massive holes for you. And in my opinion, that's almost like paying two guys the equivalent of $15 million because it does fix two holes for you. And that's just me, but there are also other lefties that you could get that are much cheaper.
Those of you who've listened to this program know I just hate the idea of paying relievers. I can't stand it. It's just I think it's an awful way to do about budgeting. But unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier on the show today, that this front office just has not proved that they're capable of putting together bullpens without having to give up. I mean, the 1 year during this competing window where they had a bullpen that looked up to par was 2023, and that was a year where you had Jordan Romano, your legitimate homegrown guy. Even that's a bit of an asterisk because he was, Rule 5, and the Rangers had to give him up. So you kind of got a little lucky there. But ultimately, look at the names in that bullpen. You had Eric Swanson, you had to give up a legitimate big league player for. You had Jordan Hicks, the guy who had to give up legitimate prospect capital for.
Didn't have to, but you did.
For Jordan
Eric
Hicks?
Swanson. No, on Eric Swanson.
Oh, right. Yes. Absolutely. No, we're not relitigating that.
Yeah.
And then you also had Chad Green, Yimi Garcia, two guys who were really good, but guys who had to go out in the market and give multi-year deals to. So basically, that was the 1 year where you were able to do it. In 21 and 22, you had 2 years where your season either you missed the playoffs in 21 and your season ended prematurely in 22 because your bullpen wasn't up to par. This front office has not done a good job of it without going out externally. So unfortunately, as unfortunate as that is in terms of a team building perspective, I think that there's enough of a track record where you can't do what you did kind of last year, where it's like, okay, let's see if we can put together these pieces. Let's see if we can trust guys internally. It's the Zach Pop thing hasn't really worked out. The guys that you have wanted to grow within your system, you have to go out there and give up legitimate capital for. So unfortunately, I think they'll have to do it, whether it's Tanner Scott, who's obviously the top of the market, or not. I think they have to get some legitimate big league ready arms on the free agent market.
So I got two names for you guys. One, Jose Leclerc, obviously just coming from the Texas Rangers, not as a closer, but as again, he's 30 years old, so he might be wanting to get paid a little bit. He's probably like Tanner Scott near the top, coming off, not a great season with the Rangers, but obviously if you watched the playoffs the year before, he was like heavily used in massive moments in that World Series run. Was he great? Yeah, he's fine. But he's another arm. The one that I'm intrigued about, fellas, is former Blue Jay for about 5 minutes, Kirby Yates. 37 years old. Obviously, he's not going to get some hefty contract worth a ton of years, all that stuff. Was an all-star last year, who had 33 saves in 61 innings, 85 punch-outs. He was an all-star last year. He might be one of those kind of guys that's not going to be overly expensive. You're not going to give him a lot of term. But at 37 years old, and when will he turn 38? He will turn that basically by season's beginning. So that's an arm there. If you don't want to go Tanner Scott, it's an option on probably a 1 year deal.
I would say Kirby Yates is one of those guys that will be a part of a bullpen reconstruction, regardless of who you get. I think even if they were to get Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates can still fit into that mix because
that'd be great.
A 38-year-old. But the other guy that I think is a more realistic option from the left side, and I'm going to probably pronounce his last name wrong, Andrew Chafin. Yeah.
Big country.
Big country.
That's the guy that I think the Jays should get from the left side. He will be a significantly more realistic price tag, and I think you can allocate Romano's money and whatever money you were willing to spend on your bullpen this year accordingly with other right-handed guys that are also available.
I'm not sure how willing he'll be to leave the U.S. after the last election, though. So we'll see about that.
But his numbers last year, I can't do this, Rob. With the Tigers was actually quite good. Near a plus of 130. What is that? 50 punch-outs and 37 innings from the left side with the Tigers. He was great. He was great for them.
He is effective. He
definitely is. And that handlebar, boy, that thing's a beauty. And you bring him over here, and if he becomes a mainstay in a good part of the bullpen, the handlebars are going down to the ballpark. So
we did
absolutely.
Yeah,
I don't know. The more we talk about it, we talked about starting pitching options, and we haven't even gone to that yet. We mentioned about
we're getting
but my point is that we're already going through. We need help externally in the offense, in the lineup. We need help externally in the bullpen, and at some point it's you realize that microeconomics is a thing. You only have a certain amount of resources.
This is why
you know what I mean.
this is why at season's end, when we hear they want to compete next year, hell, even at the trade deadline, we're like, it's great to hear that. How?
Yeah. No. And
How?
see, that's the thing. It's like you've put your own restrictions on it. We
Yeah.
were fine on the idea of you competing if it meant Vladdy was signed and you were going to extend the budget. But no, you said that you don't know if you're going to sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. In fact, you doubled down on the fact you don't think he's a great player. And secondly, a franchise player. And then secondly, you told us that you want to compete with the same budget that couldn't get you to compete this year.
So here's what I will say. That's not Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro issue. That's more of a Rodgers issue because Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins have no choice but to compete. You're winning the amount of money that they're asking for Rodgers and to not actually sell a pitch of competition, like you're losing your job at that point. My point is that the reason why I say it's a Rodgers issue is because why is Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins still here? That's the real question, you know?
Yeah.
That's like, because the thing is, like, they don't have a choice. Ross Atkins has no choice but to say, you know what, with the amount of payroll that we're running out there, we think we can win 86 games, which is all that you really need to make the playoffs these days. So I understand why they're saying it because they have no choice. They're basically on their last leg here. We've been saying they're on their last leg for 2 years now.
Yeah.
It's like eventually they're going to be on their last leg. So to me, like, I don't blame. I think that's a Rodgers philosophical problem.
Yeah. I'm going to take it back. Sorry, just quickly. I'm going to take it back to the bullpen, and the reason why we have a philosophy of not paying bullpen guys, at least not Tanner Scott type of money, not Josh Hader type of money. The reason is because bullpen guys are volatile. But why this year should be a different philosophy is because that has been the most volatile thing so far, and you haven't allocated a lot of your budget on spending. You've allocated resources, but not a lot of your budget on grabbing guys that just have done it before and proven themselves as that. So I think if you can go into this year knowing that your starting rotation is fine and that your bullpen is fine, then all you have to worry about is hoping for your internal improvements in your lineup actually coming through. And I think,
oh God, we're doing this again?
No, yes, we are. And I think that if we're being honest, that's the thing that we're like, not knowing what the bullpen is going to look like. That's the thing that matters the most. Like, what that offense does, it won't matter how good the bullpen is. Regardless of if that offense isn't going to show up again next year. I know as long as Vladdy shows up, then we have a shot. But Vladdy showed up, and we didn't have a shot, and it wasn't all because of the bullpen. So I think we have to talk about the fact that maybe we just solidify our pitching staff. Maybe we just 1 year you've allocated, $100 million into your pitching staff, and that's one thing that you can say. You know what?
So that's the argument for Corbin Burns. That's the argument for Max Fried, Corbin Burns.
And that's the one thing that this freaking front office has gotten right with the arms that they've gone out and got, right? I mean, we can go down the list.
Starters.
You acquire Robbie Ray, you turn him into Cy Young, you decide to let him walk, you get Kevin Gausman instead. Everyone's losing their mind, but in fact, we all know that was the right decision. And there's tons of things down the line. Even Chris Bassett's been good. Kikuchi, as disastrous that first season was, we saw what he got now with the Angels. He got some money because he's been a good pitcher the last couple of seasons. It's all, and
even Steven Matz, he got a 4-year deal. He got a 4-year deal after that one season.
Exactly.
Walker.
So they've done an outstanding job. It's crazy to even think about that front office and that word together, but they've done an outstanding job at building a starting rotation.
Yeah,
but that's it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go into that, build some freaking masterpiece of one, like you mentioned. Go after a Max Fried. Go after a
solidify something. That's one thing that I'm just solidify something. And yes, grabbing a Max Fried or Corbin Burns would certainly solidify a pitching staff, especially a starting rotation. I mean, the bullpen would still be light years from being finished. But here's the issue now with the rotation. You get all the credit for doing what you did in the last 3 years. Unfortunately, now we're here, and none of those guys are an ace. That's an issue. None of those guys you can count on day in and day out every 5 days. No, you can count on that, but you can't count on them in Game 1 of the postseason. You can't count on them in Game 7 of the World Series. We don't have that guy yet, and that's because you've wasted that window where you had Kevin Gausman doing that. So that's why we're entertaining the idea of grabbing another solidified front-end starter this year, because eventually, if your goal is to win a World Series while Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette are on your team, then you got to do that this year. Unfortunately, so we do need
at that point. At that point, you have a really good rotation, but then you have Will Wagner at second base and Addison Barger in left field start next season.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's ugly. This is why we don't understand how they want to compete. I just don't get it. Now, fellas, let's get into some frisky stuff near the end. All right, let's talk some trade targets, because there's one team in particular that has pretty much said, "Screw it, we want to pivot," and that is the St. Louis Cardinals. Nolan Arenado is a name that's been floating around.
Yeah, no thanks.
Okay, well, we're just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Look. Just hear me out. I'm not saying I want him. I'm just saying I'm putting it out there that he's won a shitload of Gold Gloves. Now, he is coming off the worst season of his career. He is coming off the worst season of his career. You know, an OPS of 719, an OPS plus of 101. I mean, it was an awful year and 152 games, and it's progressively starting to fall off. 774 the year before. And he is now, where is he? 32 years old. He will be 33 midway through the first month of the season. Still has 3 years left on the contract. How much would you have to give up to even get a guy like that? I don't know. But I think I can get from your guys' reactions. As to what
I would say you probably you should give up next to nothing to get Nolan Arenado. As long as you're willing to eat the majority of that contract, like you should give up pretty much nothing.
Right, and why not take the chance then at that point?
So this is why. Because you told us, your front office told you don't have the money. You don't have that money to employ Nolan Arenado at this age.
Agreed. Cool. But you also got to think, the team that's acquiring Nolan, like obviously St. Louis wants to get out of that contract. You really think the team getting that contract with where he's at his age-wise, where he's at with his numbers, is going to want to take that whole contract on? No, of course not. St. Louis is going to have to eat something.
I know, but here's my thing. Here's my problem. And I want to make Nolan Arenado has been my favorite baseball player of the last decade. And that is full stop, period. When all that Matt Chapman talk was going around, I was a Nolan Arenado defender. I legitimately love that guy. And if this was last year, I would have entertained it. But the fact that he's coming off of his worst year at his age, at that price tag, there is no shot. I'm not convinced that he's going to be, and this is a bad comparison, I'm not convinced he's going to be better than Ernie Clement next year in a 162-game season. I'm dead serious. I'm not convinced that would be the case. So I'm not willing to pay $30 million. And if I'm not paying $30 million, then that means I'm paying other asset capital that can be allocated somewhere else to trade for someone that you would be more you could count on more at third base.
You're right.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, sticking with the Cardinals, because again, they're trying to unload, and it goes back to our conversation earlier about not wanting to pay any relievers any freaking money. Well, their closer, and in my opinion, the best closer in baseball, Ryan Helsley, is a free agent at the end of next season. He's got 1 year left at $3.8 million. That's it. And he's coming off a year where he had his career high, I believe it was. He led the league in He led the league in saves at 49. He had ERA at 204. Where's his ERA plus? Of 206. 79 Ks in 66 innings pitched. He's a dog. Absolute stud. How old is he? 30 years old. Again, one year left in the contract. Yeah. At like no money. Yeah. There's your closer right there. Now. Yeah. No. Now, capital to give away.
No brainer.
Yeah, here we go to the actual. This is Patrick from SpongeBob. You give me all these great facts. Helsley's he's awesome. He's cost controlled. He's basically been one of the best relievers in baseball. And you have the Patrick Star meme where he goes, "I have $3." That's what the Blue Jays have. Like, how are they going to pull off this trade?
I don't
seriously.
I don't
on a 1 year deal though. I don't know.
And that's my only 1 year left on the contract.
If he's on the market, you don't think there's one other contender who would like have a better, more to offer than the Jays?
Well, that's why you go back and forth if you're the Cardinals, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be as high of a price tag as you currently think it is. And I do think that at least the Jays would be viable options. That's what I want to say. I agree with you that if it comes down to a bidding war, we're going to lose that bidding war. I agree. But
you also got to
realize
on the
that
market?
the Jays and the Cardinals, like for what it is, they have
They make a
great
lot of
relationship.
trades.
Exactly.
They make a lot of
They
trades.
do trade a lot between each other. Ledmus Diaz. I know there's who else am I missing?
Genesis Cabrera.
Yeah.
Who else they trade? Oh, Paul DeYoung.
All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll
Yeah.
leave it at that.
Colby Rasmus.
But bottom line, they have a good relationship. This front office and that front office, they clearly have a relationship. And a lot of the guys that the Jays have, like Steven Matz, who does he sign with? The Cardinals.
Yeah.
So it's weird how these two teams are linked together. And how many times have we heard in the offseason, the Jays are talking to Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan and all these outfielders that we kept hearing about before Varsho got traded to the Blue Jays, right? Because they've always been linked together.
There's another guy.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
No, I agree. No brainer to be in the conversation for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah. Well, obviously you pick up the phone. Obviously, like Helsley's an incredible pitcher, and they got
no. Like you're
serious... my point is, how feasible is it?
I think it's feasible. I think it's as feasible as Juan Soto. If that answers your question.
It depends how willing you are.
As Juan Soto?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I would say it's definitely more feasible than Juan Soto.
Yeah,
that's because that's more of an indictment on like how unlikely Juan Soto is, though.
No. Based off of where we are on the Juan Soto thing, we're top 5. Period. There's only,
of 5 guys in the room, you're top 5. Yeah.
No, but and we've offered him a deal, like, and he hasn't taken us out of the mix, like. The fact that you think, we all agree, that we are more feasible option for Ryan Helsley and we're top 5 for Juan Soto, well, that means we're one of the 4 teams to be in that Ryan Helsley.
No, the transitive property doesn't apply here, I don't think. I think this is a very... I think the fact pattern is very dissimilar.
I don't know if that's...
I think the fact pattern is very dissimilar. I don't think that's a good comparison, Prof.
Okay.
Class is over, fellas. We're gonna call it quits for the day.
I want to talk about the Max Fried thing. I got one thing on Max Fried.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go for it. Max Fried. I'm talking about Max Fried because he's the guy that the Jays are looking at and the guy that everybody from Jays Nation wants. I do want to just remind everybody from his last 3 years. Last year was his worst year. I also want to remind everybody he is on the other side of 30. I also want to remind everybody he doesn't strike anybody out. He is league average when it comes to striking guys out. And to be honest with you, the underlying metrics on Baseball Savant, there's not a lot of red. His pitches specifically are good. They're above average, well above average. But when it comes to, hard hit rate, walk percentage, chase percentage, whiff percentage, K percent, all of that, not very good. So I just want to... I'm a little hesitant on the whole Max Fried thing, especially considering what he's probably going to be paid.
Corbin Burns is the guy to get if you're going to go that route.
Yeah, I will say this about Max Fried. I'm just going to read off his ERA pluses since 2021.
Yeah.
143, 166, 171, and 128 last season. So 128 being the very low of it all.
Yeah, then that's what I mean. He's coming off his worst year, and yet he is still going to be a top 2 option in the free agency market. Yep. And he doesn't strike anybody out. So, and he pitches from the left side. You know how I feel about that guy? Hyun-Jin Ryu, for anybody who's not familiar with my take on that, that's basically that's as far as my take is. If you don't strike anybody out and you're pitching from the left side and you're above the age of 30 and we're paying you a bunch of money in the AL East, I'm a little hesitant.
Yeah, and then you can...
I think that's definitely fair.
You can also look at Corbin Burns, guy just coming off 5th in Cy Young Award, obviously an All-Star this past season. ERA plus of 128 last year. In his 32 starts.
Here's the other element of Corbin Burns is that by getting him, by doing so, you make the division rival worse.
Right? Oh yeah, big time. Can you imagine, fellas? The Jays are like, money? What is that? Soto, Burns. Let's screw these 2 teams over. Favorites in the AL East.
How I would love that. That, Pricey.
We're gonna end it with that, fellas. We're gonna end it right there. All right, fellas. Hey, it's a blast as always. Rob, Cole, you guys are beauties. Look, next time we'll be on here. Maybe it's Juan Soto edition.
Yeah.
Hey, 20% chance, fellas. We're 1-5. Let's get it done. I don't feel confident about that. But boys, thanks so much for coming on as always. Jimmy, appreciate you, bud, behind the scenes. And go Jays.
Go Jays.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Blue Jays Center on YouTube, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.